Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome to another round of our exciting workshops on design thinking. In this session, we have partnered with Cedar College and is brought to you all by Circle Women Pakistan, whose mission is to advance women's economic participation and empowerment through innovative entrepreneurship, advocacy campaigns, and research. We develop and support the entrepreneurial and leadership capacity of women and youth in Pakistan to bring about economic growth and social change. Some of the initiatives by Circle include Tech Karo, She Loves Tech, and Elevate. Circle believes that it is critical for Pakistan's progress to invest in youth, especially women, to build their confidence, capacity, and create platforms for them to bring their ideas forward. These workshops are supported by Friedrich Naumann Foundation for Freedom, which aims to contribute to the enhancement of soft skills in the fields of entrepreneurship, business management, strategic communication, business leadership, responsible citizenship. Today's session on design thinking will be conducted by our very talented trainer, Mr. Faisal Sherjan. Faisal is a serial entrepreneur. He has worked in convergent industries like advertising, television, media, and telephony. In the last 6 years, he has been involved with Pakistan tech entrepreneurship ecosystem as an investor, trainer, and mentor. After 3 years leading the LUMS Business Incubator, he is now an advisor to the Collabs, a co-working space and business accelerator. So without any further delays, over to you, Faisal.
Yeah, I'm on an online session. I'll call you just after. Hello? Yeah, I said I'm on an online session. I'll call you after. I'll just get after. I'll message him now. Assalamualaikum. Who's moderating this?
Okay, so Sahar Akbar is here from Team Circle.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Excuse me, I can't hear you. G.
Assalamu
Hello?
alaikum. Can you hear me?
G.
Yes, can you hear?
I can hear you now.
Okay, so Sahar Akbar is here from Team Circle. You can start with the workshop.
All
I
right.
have already given the introduction.
Okay, thank you. Assalamualaikum. I'm sorry I'm a little late. Actually, I was up very late. I was on a couple of calls in the US. So how many participants do we have? About 18, I think 18 students. So Cedar College, can I know a little more about it? If one of you can just tell me a little bit about Cedar College, right? At what stage you all are around the, what kind of courses you're taking? Anyone? Okay, I'll nominate somebody. Then the first name that comes up is Aisha Abdul Qadir. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, can somebody, is there anybody amongst the students who can hear me? Nobody seems to be responding.
Please unmute yourself and speak. Any of the students?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum, sir. Yes, we can hear you. I am Ushna Batul from Cedar College, and
Yeah.
I'm in A2. And I have computer science, maths, and physics in my A2s.
Okay, very nice. All right, so let's start with understanding what design thinking really means. Right, so a lot of people think design thinking looks at, how anything is going to appear aesthetically. It isn't actually. right? It is much more about how you think. And it's a question of, how you approach any problem. The crux of design thinking is actually the problem and not necessarily the solution. So to put it in very simple words, what we normally talk about in workshops about design thinking is falling in love with the problem and not falling in love with your solution, because there is always a tendency that when you look at any issue or when you look at or an idea pops into your head and you suddenly have an idea, and because the idea has come up in your own head, you tend to think that that's the best thing that could possibly happen. You start to run with that idea without stopping to think whether what you are looking at, the kind of solution, product, service you're going to offer to any segment of customers is the best thing that could possibly be done. And we come across it every day, right? Whenever running the entrepreneurship center at LUMS, we used to select a cohort every 6 months. And invariably, most of the founders or most of the entrepreneurs who used to come and pitch would start with saying, I have an idea. And we'd say, forget about the idea, tell us what the problem is. And they'd say, what do you mean, what problem? I don't have a problem, I have an idea. And we'd again repeat and so say, no, first tell us what the problem is. So it took a while for people to understand that the idea is actually far more important than the solution. The problem is far more important than the solution. It's the problem that actually ensures that you come up with something which will be of use to someone. So the first word that we talk about in design thinking is actually empathy. And what does empathy really mean, right? So you start with this one word, which is the crux and the key to all design thinking, empathy. It actually takes you towards understanding a person who has a problem. It could be explained in very simple terms. It could be a problem that you face on a daily basis on your own. How do you go? How do you come to school? Right? Somebody has to bring you, drop you. If somebody is not available to bring you, you have a problem. Right? And say, how do I get to school and how do I get back? It's as simple as that. At times it's a very simple thing that actually starts to rankle. Most of you know about Uber and Careem. So what was the problem that Uber actually addressed? Because Uber was the first kind of major ride-hailing service. Travis Kalanick, the CEO of Uber, his elevator pitch used to be, how many of you have faced a problem and you want to get somewhere? You come down or you come out of your home or you come down from the building, stand on the road, wait for a cab to come. Many cabs pass you. Some of them are already carrying passengers. And then finally you see an empty one, you hail it, it stops, you get in and you go. By that time, you've lost time. You've had to come out of the building before you actually wanted to go somewhere because you're allowing for time. So how would it be if you had a simple single button on your phone, you press that button and a car turns out? Simple problem with a solution. And from that emerged Uber, a multi-billion dollar decacorn, right? Decacorns are unicorns with more than $10 billion. At one point in time, Uber being valued at $120 billion with a solution to a simple problem. Eventually, they started to invest a lot of that money into newer technologies, self-driving cars, auto-driving trucks, auto delivery pods. All that came out of that one simple single problem. So empathy is the key. And for empathy, you need to know who has that pain, who is facing that problem. So you start to work towards understanding that customer, that person, or a segment that is actually defined by that one person. So you find that one person, and there will be hundreds of thousands and millions like that one person. Just run that through your mind. And say, if I think of a young girl who's, let's say, 18 years old. She's studying in a college. She has to go to college every day. She may need transportation. She may need communication. She may need, she wants to wear the right clothes to go to school. So all these are little problems in her mind. But when you start to understand her, you start to understand a whole segment of consumers like her. So you start with empathy, and it starts to lead you into an understanding of your customer segment, whoever that customer may be. At times, the customer is in our own home, right? We see our mother, we see our father, we see our siblings, and we see that they are dealing with a particular problem or a pain point. And if we have a solution, or if we can devise a solution for that problem or pain point, we may possibly have a business, or we may have an idea that leads to a business. There is never necessarily a single solution to a single problem. There may be multiple solutions to the same problem. How do you arrive at the best solution? You start with understanding the customer. You start with empathy. To give you a simple example of empathy, if you go to Japan and you order a cup of coffee at a McDonald's, they don't give you a sachet of sugar that you need to then put into that cup and stir it to dissolve it so your coffee becomes sweet. They actually give you liquid sugar. That's an example of empathy. The reason why they give you liquid sugar, because you're most likely to want your coffee to be very hot. And they give you that liquid sugar, so that process of stirring is very short. It does not take long. Your coffee doesn't get cold. Empathy could be as simple as that. Empathy could also be much, much deeper, right? A bigger problem that somebody's trying to solve, a life-saving problem that's being solved. I mean, I had a conversation last night with a biotech scientist, a Pakistani origin biotech scientist in Boston. She is exploring. She's a postdoctoral student. She was exploring. She's working on genetic research. She came across a gene which actually inhibits leukemia. If you eliminate that gene, leukemia is curable. It slows down that whole process that affects people when they have leukemia, when they have blood cancer. She has come on to a very big problem, right? That saves lives. And she has identified through her research, through her endeavor, a solution to that problem. That is one solution that is possible. She's now going to explore the design of a drug that does exactly what she did in the lab. When you look at all these examples, you begin to understand that the key to developing any solution which is viable in the market is empathy, understanding of the customer. If you will Google today, and I hope that you will, look at customer persona, right? You'll find multiple templates. You will find multiple videos on YouTube that explain to you what customer persona is. Because understanding the customer is the critical element of doing anything that is of use to them, is of value to them. So I would advise you to look at customer persona, and let's understand what customer persona really is in a very simple terms in the context of this workshop. So we need to understand, let's say, who respond, Amna Batul, right? And say exactly who is Amna. So the first thing is the demographics. How old is Amna? Where does she live? Right? What kind of education she has? What kind of income the family has? What is her normal day like? Right? Does she go out? Does she stay at home? Does she go to college? Does she go to school? Does she go to work? What happens when her work day is over or her college day is over? So you start to understand who Amna really is. When you start to understand it at a deeper level, you start to understand the psychographics, the attitude that Amna has, the way she looks at various things, the way she looks at responds to various problems or challenges. What motivates Amna? What excites her in terms of conversations? What excites her in terms of content? Right? What excites her when she has time for leisure? What does she like to do? All these questions need to be answered about Amna to form a very detailed picture of who she really is. Without understanding her, there is no way that you can actually design any solution or create any product or any service that will be of use to Amna. If you think right now, just for a little brief, let's say 10 seconds, you'll begin to see that in your own mind, you will find a lot of problems that actually bother you. And when you start to look at those problems, you will start to also understand yourself and say, all right, what is it that I normally do in my day? When I wake up in the morning, to the time that I go to sleep, what are all the things that I do? When do I get up? Do I have breakfast in the morning? Do I not have breakfast in the morning? Do I go to work? Do I go to school? Do I go to college? My friends, my colleagues, my environment, my community, all these factors come together to form a customer persona. Once that persona is deepened and you begin to understand the customer at a very infinite and intimate level, you begin to understand what kind of challenges they face. And each one of those challenges is actually an opportunity. So look at problems as opportunities, because that's what they really are. If you could not identify a problem, you cannot create an opportunity. Again, we can take multiple examples around us. By Kia as an example, Dawai, the company that delivers medicines, is an example. Mandi Express is an example. Right? Here are people, entrepreneurs, who have actually identified a problem that relates to a customer segment and are offering a solution to that. And through that solution is the opportunity to build a big business. By Kia, if any of you know about it, has now raised $22 million. And what is the problem that they're solving? They're solving the problems of urban mobility, getting people from one place to the other in one of the cheapest modes of transportation available and possible, which is motorbikes. So you press a button on your phone and a bike rider turns up. The bike rider may be taking you from point A to point B, or the bike rider will turn up and you want something delivered from where you wanted to send it to where you want it to be received. Now they're developing more services. But the key remains urban mobility. The key remains being able to move around in a large city like Karachi, being able to deliver things in a large city like Karachi. Right? So looking at a problem and then defining it at a deep level. What exactly are all the elements of that problem? So time is normally one element. Being able to do things faster than they were normally done. Because time always has value. So when you're defining a problem, you start to look at all the elements of that problem. You look at the time element. You look at the distance element. You look at what kind of solution offers a better way of doing something. So human beings throughout the ages, right, even if you go back 70,000 years, you will find that their singular endeavor has always been to harness some kind of energy to be able to do the task that they had to do in a better, faster way. And when you do it faster and you value time and you are able to do more in the same amount of time, it also becomes cheaper. So faster, better, cheaper are three words that you will come across again and again if you take on the entrepreneurship journey. If you become an entrepreneur, that you will always be looking at something that will be faster, that will be cheaper, and that will be better than what you're used to. Again, the example of Uber and Careem. If you look at it, all three words will apply there. And then you come to Baikia, and Baikia makes it cheaper than Uber and Careem also. So faster, better, in some cases, and then cheaper. So you look at it from those lenses. You start to define the problem. You, after you've understood the customer, your definition of the problem starts. And it is necessary that you look at every single facet of that problem, because then you will start to see the probable solutions, never a single solution, multiple solutions. So we always talk about, when we do a physical workshop, actually design thinking is better done in a group of people when you're working together. Individually also, you have your individual input, and then you're working together as a team, as a group, and you start to define. You first develop the customer persona, you deepen that, you deepen your understanding, your empathy, then you start to define the problem. And you look at every element of the problem. When we say always go for quantity at that stage, not for quality, which is kind of flipping things on their head. Normally you see, give me quality, not quantity. But in this case, you want quantity rather than quality. You want every possible solution to be put on the table. In design thinking workshops, we normally put them on walls. So we put up posters which have all kinds of elements about that one problem. Saying what are really, if I have a problem, so what are the elements of that problem, right? Does it cost me more? Does it take more time? Uh, can I do something better than that? Can I do it with somebody else? Can we do it collectively? Do I have to do it individually? What are the kind of tools that I can use? What are the kind of let's say applications that I can use? My mobile phone, how effective can that be? How important can that be to solving that problem? Because without your mobile phone, without the Uber Kareem apps, you could not use Uber and Kareem. So you dump everything, every element of that problem. You dump it on a piece of paper, or you dump it on, let's say, a wall where you can see it, and you can list all of them. And then you start working through the process of filtering them. Then you start to look at each one of those and say, all right, which ones do I keep? Which ones do I discard? So classically, when we're doing problem discovery, we first talk about the problem from all its elements, which means put everything about that problem onto that wall. Then we see and say, what is it that would be the consequence of not solving this problem? So if I don't solve the problem, what will be the consequences of that? Every single element that I can think of. Again, quantity rather than quality. So I look at it and say, my problem is I need to have a reliable, affordable means of transportation to go to work every day and come back home. That's the problem. Now, if I don't solve this problem, what are the consequences? I will get late going to work. I will most likely lose my job if I am late too many times. I will have to struggle on the road to find transport to get to where I want to be. I will have to pay more at times to be able to use any kind of transportation to get to where I want to. Right? So I will lose time. I will not have something available at the time that I want to go somewhere. I arrive at a different city. I don't know anybody there. How do I move around in the city? So all these consequences of that one problem, which is mobility, right? You take them out and you list them. Once you've done that, then you start to think and say, if I solve this problem, what will be the benefits of that? So I again start to think in the same way, and I start to think of everything, every benefit that I will get from the solution of that problem. So look at any problem around you, define it, see who it affects, then start to look at all the elements of that problem and say, okay, what happens if I don't solve this problem? What happens if I do solve this problem? Once I've done that, then I bring them together as a cluster, right? So I have a complete picture, because what I've done so far is I've collected pieces of the puzzle. Now I bring it all together and say, here was the problem that I had. This was the consequence of not solving that problem. If I solve this problem, these are the benefits I have. So now I can move on to saying, how do I do it? So the ideation starts. The how do I do it is the ideation stage. This is where my ideas will start to come. Again, as many ideas as possible. Not a singular idea, but multiple ideas. I can move around in the city using a rickshaw. I can move around the city if there is a cab available. I can move around the city with Uber and Kareem. I can move around the city with Baikia. I can take a bus to go from point A to point B. If you're in Lahore now, you have the orange train. That starts to solve that problem. So you look at all the possible solutions, and out of those, using the lenses of what are the benefits of solving that problem, what were the consequences of not solving it, you start to narrow down on the most probable, best solution that comes up using those filters. So now you're at the ideation phase and you're saying, okay, what do I do? How do I do it? What are the resources I need? What will be the cost of solving this problem with this particular solution? So all the elements that you've worked on so far, which means understanding the customer centricity. That's the first thing. Then defining the problem, every single element of it. Then the ideation stage, in which you further understand what that problem was, what kind of elements it has, and then you start to ideate. So the, the mistake most people make are jumping straight to ideation, straight to saying, I have an idea. So one of the examples that I have come across, and it was a real example, right? Three students at Lums were sitting at the dhaba, which is like an outdoor tea stall, and waiting for another friend. So he turned up late. So everybody was obviously not very happy with him. They ripped him and said, yeah, why do you have to do this every time? Why are you late today? So he said, look, just when I was about to run out and come, my mother stopped me. And she said, you've been promising me you're going to empty out the store. And you've been doing it for so many days. Today, you're not leaving before you empty the store. So I went into the store and I saw that there was piles of junk lying there. Things that we haven't used in a long time. My cycle, when I was a 3-year-old, was still lying there. There were things lying there that we haven't used for years. So I started to think about it. I could take it out and I could throw it away, but I didn't do that. I just neatly placed them in the store. And I think if we all sit down and we create a platform where people can trade such things, where people can look into their own home and see what they don't use anymore and trade it for something which is far more useful to them. How would that work? So here is somebody who started the problem, who went into the store and saw junk lying there. He started to think about how everybody else does the same thing, how everybody has things lying in their home that they never use or they've used at one time. They never use it again. And then what happens? So, I mean, as an example, in the US, people buy drills from Black & Decker. And 80% of the time, the drill is used only once because you needed to do something that one time. You wanted to hang a picture, you wanted to maybe put a clothesline, you wanted to put something in the back of your bathroom door. So you went out and you got a drill and you drilled that hole and you put the drill away and you didn't need it for the next 2 years because you didn't need to drill anything. So why is it lying there? You spend money on it. So simple problems like that, simple things that you see around you like that could possibly become an opportunity if it affects enough people, if enough people are doing the same thing that you've seen yourself. So you look at it from that stage. Ideation. How many ways can I solve this problem? And once you've started to ideate, you will start to see which is most probably the best idea out of the whole lot. None of these entrepreneurs that we know of who are big entrepreneurs actually started with in saying, day one, I'm going to do this. Steve Jobs, when he was 8 years old, saw the first computer and he got fascinated. And his desire was that everybody should have a computer. That is where he started from. Everybody should have a computer. Nobody should be without one. And when you think of it, Only large corporations had computers at that time. Even small companies didn't have computers. At the same time, you had Bill Gates thinking of almost the same thing and saying everybody should have a computer. Everybody should have power to be able to solve problems using a machine that I can possibly design for them. I can possibly build for them. Starting with a very simple thing, that why should it only be large corporations that have these tools? These tools should be available to everybody. And from there, the whole journey of personal computing started. Wozniak was the engineer, the brilliant engineer. Steve Jobs was the ideas person. He was the person who could look at the problem, who could understand it, who could break it down into its elements, who could say, these are the possible solutions, who could then ideate and say, I will solve this problem in this way. I'm going to make a computer that is going to be the most beautifully designed. I'm going to make that desktop computer that has the best fonts, right? I don't know how many of you have read anything about Steve, but one of the key things about him, he never went to college. He didn't take any university courses, except one. The only course he took was calligraphy. He learned how words can be designed. Letters can be designed, not words, but letters can be designed. He studied calligraphy. And if you look at the iMac or you look at your own iPhone, you will see that it has possibly the best fonts. It is the best design. We talk about, the experience that an iPhone offers you. Even before you take it out of the box, when you buy an iPhone, the packaging is so beautiful, it's so simple. When you actually open the box, when you pull it up, when you pull up the upper portion of the box, you feel it. It is perfectly designed. It's perfectly designed. So he is actually sitting in your mind. He has understood you. He's understood what kind of experience he needs to create for you. When you open the box, you see this phone and you see just the charging wire, and you see now a little pin, right, to replace the SIM or to put the SIM in. Nothing else. There is no booklet that explains how to use your iPhone. It is so beautifully designed that there is no need to give you instructions on how to use it. All you need to do is switch it on, and that's it. Right? It only comes from having understood what customers really want, what customers will really desire, what customers will feel really good about. It starts with that, right? It starts with that factor of empathy. Look at the iPod and look at the iPhone, right? So music was always something that everybody, most of us here, I'm sure, in fact, all of us here, have some kind of love for music. So what was the problem? I couldn't carry my music around with me. My music was limited to where I was, to my geography. If I was at home and I had a boom box or I had a music player, that's when I could listen to music. If I was in a car and I had a radio, maybe I could listen to music. But if I was sitting in a park, I couldn't listen to music because I couldn't carry it with me, or I had to carry a big boom box to be able to listen to music. So then came the Discman, and then came other things. But when the iPhone, then the iPod debuted, before that there were other players also. But what did Apple do? It understood the customer again and said customers like to listen to certain kind of music. So if I give them a platform, if I give them iTunes that can actually start to understand what kind of music they like, I will start to make their experience better. That is why the iTunes platform was a critical part of that musical journey. Because every time you wanted to load a song, you had to connect to the iTunes platform. Every time you wanted to create a playlist, you had to connect to the iTunes platform. Every time you wanted to share any music, you have to connect. So every little element, right, comes together and makes that experience better. So your experience of listening to music kept on getting better and better because of the iTunes platform. The data was flowing. What was the other side of it? When the iPhone came out, and Apple said, we're going to charge 99 cents for every song you download, the music industry initially was not supportive because they wanted their own distribution. They were selling records, they were selling CDs, they were selling DVDs. They had record shops, Virgin and Tower Records and Mega Records. They all had shops, and there was physical media. So there was a major shift in the mindset, and you now had a device that you could carry in your pocket that could carry 1,000 songs. That's where it started from. Now it can carry hundreds of thousands of songs. So there is no limitation on the number of songs you have. But the best part of it is it starts to understand you. It starts to look at what you're playing, when you're playing it, what kind of mood do you play, what songs in. Deeper and deeper understanding of the customer. And that data was what helped Apple convince the record companies, the record labels, to adopt the iPhone, to adopt iTunes, and say, put your songs there and we will sell it for you. Easy beats free every time. That's a classic Steve Jobs statement. Easy beats free every time. If you make it easy for me, I'm more likely to pay for it than not pay for it because you've simply created more convenience for me. We are by inclination lazy people. You know, human beings are one of the laziest species. We rest more, we want to do more with expending less energy. So anytime anybody makes it easy for us, we are willing to pay for it, we are willing to value it. Right? So in the ideation stage, all these elements should then be brought together before we arrive at that one single solution that we feel is the best thing. These three elements that we talked about, right? First, empathy and understanding of the customer through the problem that the customer has. Second, the stage of defining the problem at its deepest elements, at its singular elements, at every little bit of that problem. Third, the ideation stage. Now, these three elements, when you bring them together, you start to define what is called the customer journey, which is a very important element, as important as your customer persona is your customer journey. Your first point of contact with the customer, the, the iPhone box is your first point of contact at times with the iPhone. Before that, you've heard about it, you've thought about it, and you say, I'm going to buy an iPhone. Once you bought an iPhone, your journey takes on a different meaning. To buying your next iPhone and the next iPhone, it's a different journey. But for somebody who's never used an iPhone, who's never bought an iPhone, that first point of contact with the iPhone, which comes with that packaging, is a critical part of that journey. So I start with awareness. I become aware of something. Somebody reaches out to me. They may reach out on television, they may reach out on digital media, they may reach out through Facebook, they may reach out through Instagram, and we see that every day in our lives, and there's retargeting and remarketing, and that keeps coming up again and again. Because algorithms behind these platforms begin to see me and they begin to look at my digital clues. Every time I go online, I'm going to leave a digital clue behind. Those clues collectively together start to form a picture of me. The persona gets deeper and deeper. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the problem that Facebook had vis-a-vis the last elections, of how people were manipulated. They were forced to vote for a particular candidate in a certain way. Sorry about this. And this company called Cambridge Analytica, right, which had developed algorithms that could actually create a deeper persona of people who are on Facebook, who are likely to be voters in the elections. And they started to, by forming a profile, they started to then work on those key elements that would make them shift towards voting for a particular candidate. In this case, it was Donald Trump. I'm talking about the last election. Cambridge Analytica did the same thing with Brexit, whether UK would stay in the European Union or leave the European Union. They actually targeted people who they felt, or who not they felt, who they knew would be convinced to vote to leave. A small town in Wales is an example. That small town had huge investments from the European Union. Town halls, gyms, community halls, libraries, everything. But that town still voted to leave the European Union because Cambridge Analytica convinced each one of those people that if they stayed in the European Union, the Turks were coming. They created fear of the Turks. Now, how do you do that? You look at what their behavior is, you look at what they read, you look at what they share, you look at what they say, what kind of updates they're making. So the algorithms are picking up all these clues and creating a persona. Once they've created that persona, then they start to target you with the information that they want you to have. They create those little doubts. From that doubt, you start to deepen it and you create a perception. From that perception, you lead somebody to do something that they wouldn't normally do. And this actually has happened in that little town in Wales. If any of you have watched it on Netflix, you will see what Cambridge Analytica did and how they did it. Same thing is happening all around us. So we need to understand that cognitive resonance. Now, the whole crux of advertising are these two words, cognitive resonance. And what it says is that human beings question and often regret every decision they make. A simple example is when you go to buy a pair of shoes. Most shoppers will go to multiple shops before they even sit down and start to try shoes, or they will go to multiple shops and try different kinds of shoes. Now, in that, there will be different designs, there will be different colors, there will be different heel sizes. You'll be thinking in your mind where you're going to wear it, what are you going to wear it with. All these questions are in your mind. All these problems are there in your mind. And you're looking for a pair of shoes. That's all you're doing. Eventually, you find that right pair of shoes that you think is the perfect one. You like the color, you like the design, you put it on, you walk a few steps, it feels comfortable. You look at the mirror, you see it on your feet, and you say, this is the right pair of shoes. You buy that. You come home. Even on the journey home, you start to think about it. And you say, actually, the other pair I saw was also very nice. And that second shop that I went to Stylo's shop and I saw that maybe that was the better one that I should have got. So you start to think of that. It starts to get deeper and deeper. And then when you put on those shoes and you come out and somebody notices your shoes and says, that's a beautiful pair of shoes. Now starts that process of cognitive resonance. You had in your mind first taken your decision, looking at all the elements that were there. What kind of a shoe I'm looking at, what kind of color I'm looking at, where am I going to wear it, how should it look on my feet, how comfortable it should be. So all these elements were there. And then you made a decision to buy a particular pair of shoes. After you had made that decision, after you had paid, after you had left the shop, you start to think about it and say, maybe I should have bought the other pair of shoes. So that is dissonance. You're questioning your decision. You're now questioning it more and more. Different elements start to come in your mind. But then somebody sees you wearing those shoes and positively remarks and says, that's a lovely pair of shoes. Now you got endorsement, you got resonance. So you start to adopt, or you start to come to the conclusion that you made the right decision. Right? So these are all elements of human decision making that you actually have to use to understand your customer, to understand their problem, to then understand elements deeper at a deeper level of the problem, and then ideate, and then say, if I design this pair of shoes in this manner, it has this sole, it has this heel, it is made out of this particular kind of leather, it is of this color, you would have created that pair of shoes that that customer is going to buy. After ideation, the next stage is obviously trying to make that product or make that service, which is what we call prototyping. So prototyping starts after ideation. Now I've designed that one solution that I feel will solve that problem in the best manner possible for that identified customer segment. So I start to prototype. I start to make that, whether I'm selling a phone, a computer, a service, I'm running a cloud kitchen and saying, I'm going to serve these 5 dishes to start with. So I've ideated. Now I say, okay, what kind of dishes am I going to cook? And what is going to be the recipe that I'm going to make it from? If I'm going to make the perfect biryani, I've got to have the perfect recipe. How do I get to the perfect recipe? I start to work at it. I start to experiment. I start to make it, add different elements. I test it. I prototype it first. So I make the perfect biryani dish. Now I want to test it. So first the prototyping. So prototyping will be in a singular manner that I want to create a single prototype. I want to create a single service. I want to create that perfect application that will very quickly get that car to me when I need it. And in that application will be elements that satisfy my customer journey. When I press the button and my ride is accepted, I will begin to see how long it's going to take for that car to arrive or that bike to arrive. So my expectation is managed because my journey, my customer journey needs to be managed by my service provider. They must tell me how long it's going to take for the car to get to me. I can actually see it coming on a map. So my expectations are being managed. So this prototyping stage is an important stage because now I'm making the product or I'm designing the service. And I have to come to that perfect prototype that I can then test with the customer. In the prototyping, everything has to be finessed. You have to arrive at a workable prototype. It does not have to be the perfect absolute solution, but it has to be a workable solution. Because that work, again, when we look at, let's say, things that we use every day, Facebook as we see it today and Facebook as it was 15 years ago, there's a huge difference. They did not launch the Facebook we see today 15 years ago. They did launch a utility which is called Facebook that allowed you to create your own personal profile on a platform and then start to connect with your friends and family and extended friends and extended, let's say, circles that had similar likes, similar things that they wanted. That's why the like button, right? So bringing people together because they are more or less thinking of the same things. So those elements, the initial Facebook that was made was prototyped in Harvard, one of the dorms. Then comes the stage of testing. So you offer it to people to start using it. With big companies, when they're looking at products which are going to affect hundreds of millions of people, they first carry out what are called friendly user trials, FUTs, friendly user trials. That may be a group of people that you know. They may be friends, they may be family, they may be a sample segment of consumers that you can actually reach out to who are willing to test and try your product. And the purpose of that is to see how people actually relate to your problem. So what we look at and say that during this friendly user trial, you start to get data. You start to get data on how they use it, the user's own ability to use it. So your user experience starts to crystallize. You may have created an app that you think is perfect. You put out the prototype, or you give it to friendly users. They come back to you and say, listen, the navigation is not good. If you change this around, if this button goes on the left, and if I press this button and these elements turn up on my screen, another grid comes up on my screen out of which I can select where do I go next. That will be better than what you've given me. So you start to test. So this is the fourth stage of design thinking. You define the problem. You first identified the problem and the segment that it affects. You then defined the problem. You then ideated a solution. You created a prototype. And now you're going to test the prototype. So you carry out friendly user trials. At times, people just put it out in the market, like Facebook did, and said, okay, start using it. People started using it. As the data came in, they started to add more elements to it. The elements could be in the design of how it appears. The elements could be in how you use it. The elements could be in making it simpler for you. The elements could be in, further deepening your customer journey, improving your user experience. So we experience it every day. How many apps do we have on our phones? Maybe a couple of dozen. And each app gives us a particular kind of experience. Not all of them are similar. They will give you different kind of experience. Even Uber and Kareem, the experience may be slightly different, will be slightly different. So all that has been arrived at through that user testing, usability testing, right? And through that definition of user experience, getting the data, then tweaking, then making those little changes. At times you make bigger changes, at times you redo the whole thing. Rarely, but that it does happen sometimes that you create the wrong design, you create the wrong product, and you need to completely revamp it. So you go back to what we call the drawing board and you do it again. Cars is an example. Not much changes in cars, not much changes in the design of the car. At times there's a major shift, something major happens, right? From a time that you had to, kind of bind a handle to lower the window or raise the window, came the electrical window. That is a big shift. But if you look at it on an average, on a year-on-year basis, there's not much change in the cars. They remain the same, unless now going to the next stage, they become self-aware. They know where they are, they know what's around them. They can navigate themselves, they can self-drive. So all these things start to develop out of understanding customers, understanding, what their lives are like, because customer behavior is changing. Customer behavior changes because their environment changes. And by environment, we don't just mean the weather, we mean everything around them. The city changes around them. People start to live in apartment buildings rather than big homes. So their requirements change. Their requirements of managing energy changes. Their requirements of managing their home, cleaning their home changes. All these things start to happen. I was asked a question once by a very good friend, and he said, "What's the cheapest way to go to work?" So I started running it in my mind and said, maybe if you walk to work, that is the cheapest. You live about a kilometer away from where you work. So I said, you walk. He said, no, you expend energy. So energy is always going to cost you, whether you're walking or anything. So I said, okay, you use a cycle. So that uses less energy. No, all right, there's a bus. I can take the bus to work. Still paying. Still have to go onto the road, stand at the bus stand, take the bus. So he worked through that. And I couldn't figure out what was his, what is the solution. So finally I asked him, and this is on television. So I asked him, so I said, what's the cheapest way to work? He said, take the elevator, live upstairs, work downstairs. And people do that. In cities in the world, in China, there are entire cities like that, where people are living upstairs, working downstairs, or working in very close proximity from where they live. But if you work downstairs, that is probably the best way to go to work. Take an elevator. What could be simpler than that? What could be less, use of energy than that? What could be cheaper than that? So, these kind of things, when you prototype something, you start to test it. Once you get the testing done, you start to get data from your customers. They're themselves using it. They're themselves telling you what they like, what they don't like. All that now goes back to that first stage of understanding the customer and their problem. So here is a closed loop now. The loop is being closed. After you put it in the market, after you offered it to somebody to test it, you get that data, you get that deeper understanding, you take it back to the problem. So that is why we keep saying, fall in love with the problem. And that is the one thing that you must always be in love with, because that will lead you to then that journey again, that you, once you understood what the customer wants, once you understood how they behave, once you understood how they use what you've defined for them. I mean, there's so many things around us. SMS. Uh, Most of you will probably be not using SMS as much as our generation used to. There was a time that I was working with a very large media company, and I'm talking about 2011, 2012, that particular year, Pakistan was number 4 in the world on the use of SMS. Number 4, right? So you had China, India, Philippines, and Pakistan. And it was mind boggling. And you said, but Pakistan, the rate of literacy is very low. So how are people using SMS? Because at that time you did not have smartphones, or you didn't have enough smartphones with people. You had to use those old feature phones. And they had voice calling and they had SMS. And you start and say, how can they use SMS so often? And then we started discovering, we actually started to research that. And we found out that they use something called Roman. They're writing Urdu in English because you couldn't write Urdu and Urdu on those keypads that you had on those phones. The Unicode support wasn't there. So the computer science students here would understand what I mean by Unicode support. So Urdu wasn't supported. So you had to write your Urdu in English. And that particular year, 350 billion messages, 350 billion messages were sent in Pakistan, SMS messages. So at times, consumers design and define what they want to do. So it wasn't just the very literate who were using the SMS. Everybody else was using the SMS also. And then the missed call. I didn't want to spend money calling somebody, or I just wanted to get their attention. So I made a missed call. I made a call, I dialed, and after one ring, I cut it off. In India, this became a business model. There was a company that emerged that used the missed call as a business model. Even now, Lever is offering a product. They've just recently launched a campaign on Lifebuoy, and they say, give us a missed call. So you give them a missed call on a 4-digit code. And in consequence of that call, somebody calls you back. You've just made a missed call. You just dialed it, one ring, you switch it off. At the other end, that number has now been registered and it is considered as an opt-in, that you have opted in for that service. So somebody will reach out to you and it's related to health. So they will reach out to you to understand what your problem is and maybe offer you a solution. So you look at all these things and you say, there's an opportunity in everything. There's a problem everywhere. The problem may be a simple one. The problem may be a more complex one. The problem may be a really deep one. You look at it from that, you start to, find the elements, you define them, you then ideate on them, you then prototype them, you make what you think is going to be the solution for it, the perfect solution, the best solution for it. You test that solution, you get that data, you deepen the customer journey by then taking it back to that first stage and redoing everything and improve what you offer. So this, in a nutshell, is design thinking. Normally, we would be doing it collectively in a room where we would be going through every single stage of it. Not necessarily the testing and prototyping, because we may not have a product, but we will be defining all the stages and say, what is it that we do next? How do we conduct the tests? How do we, when we get the data, what do we do with it? All those things. So if anybody has any questions at this stage. No questions? All right, let me ask you a few questions. If I can just, let's say, I'm just going to pick out randomly. So Sarah Ahmed, 1950033. Sarah, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right, Sarah. So tell us, what do we mean by customer persona?
We basically give the customer our product and we try to find out how they feel about that product, how we are going to give them the customized experience, and how we are going to make our product better for them.
Right. So in the customer persona, the first thing is identifying the customer, right? Before we offer them anything, before we give them a product. You're right about customizing, you're right about understanding and then making those changes in your product or service. But the customer persona starts much earlier. It starts with, I, I say, okay, Sarah is my customer. Now I need to understand who Sarah is, right? We talked earlier about, I think, who is it? One of the other, I think it was Batul. So you start, Amna Batul, I think. So we start with the first understanding the person, the name of the person, their demographics, their age, right? Where do they live? Where do they study? Do they work or do they study or do they stay at home? You know, what kind of challenges they face? What are their motivations? That is your first beginning. You cannot do anything. You cannot design a product. You cannot understand what they want unless you first understand the person. And that later on becomes understanding of millions of people. Simple things tell you, let's say if you go to, what is it, Zamzama, you're planning to start a boutique in Zamzama, lane 12, and you have multiple options. You're very excited. You are a designer. You've designed a collection. You want to start servicing customers. You want your first customer. You want to send your first dress. Now you've got to find a place. So you go and there are three options. None of those options offers you the ground floor. The only options you find are on the first floor. So the first thing that you face now as a barrier, as a problem, is will your customer climb those stairs to come to your boutique when they have other options which are more accessible, which are at the ground floor? So how do I solve that problem? How do I bring that customer up the first floor? How do I get them to climb those 20 stairs? Right? So you need to understand what kind of customer will climb those stairs, what kind of customer will not climb those stairs. Because you need to get those customers coming into your shop, into your boutique. Right? So break everything down into those simple, solvable elements and say, I have to have this boutique. In all of Zamzama, I could not find a ground floor. I either found a basement or I found the first floor. If I'm lucky, maybe on top, somebody else has got an apartment. So either I'm going to go into the basement, which again means I'll go down 10, 12 stairs and I'll have to come back up, or I have to climb to the first floor, right, to access the boutique. Just that little element, just that little problem will start to make you think and say, what is it that I will do? Will I be visible? Will they even see my board? And if they see my board, will they want to come up? So I will then start to think and think, how do I bring them up those 12 or 20 or 15 stairs? The messaging that I will put out, the content that I will put out, why should they climb those stairs? What is at the end of those stairs? What is the value that I'm offering them? Why should they make that effort? Right? So I have to understand my customer before I even start to solve that problem. You got it?
Yes, sir, I got it.
All right, great. So let's take the next stage in terms of saying, how do we define the problem? I've just given you an example of a boutique that you want to start, or maybe you want to start a small little burger shack. You feel that you've perfected the recipe for the perfect burger, for the best burger, and you want to sell that. Where are you going to sell that from? Are you going to go into a market where there are already burger shops? Right? Am I going to go to Khada market and open another, kebab roll shop? Will I fare? How will I fare in that noise level that's there? Right? The people who are already there, the competition that's already there. Or do I go offside, or do I go a little further away? Do I go into a place which is more accessible? Because accessing that place through Khada market, one-way system, right? There's a bit of friction there. So one of the key things that marketers do is reduce friction for the customer. The more you reduce that friction, the better you make their journey. The better the journey, the more the likelihood that they will buy your product or service, and they will come back for it also. They will become your advocates, and then they will become your promoters. They will go and talk to other people also and say, I've had the best experience there. And one of the reasons I was in Karachi and I used to take my son out for a burger or my daughter, I would go to the burger shack. The reason why I went to the burger shack, the burger was good, but it was also convenient. It was not very congested. I could go there, I could park, I would go and order a burger, I'd go back, sit in the car. I would keep seeing, when my delivery order was ready to go pick it up. So they had reduced friction. They had created a customer experience that brought more and more customers. And when you went to the burger shack and you had a good experience, you're going to tell others. You're going to tell your friends. You're going to tell family and say, you want to have a burger, go to the burger shack. You have to look at it from that lens in that manner. All right. So who's going to take on the definition? How do you define the problem? And why is it important to define the problem? Any volunteers? Cedar College doesn't have volunteers. Nobody wants to volunteer.
I can answer again if you want.
No, let's give somebody else a chance. So I'm going to look at my screen. So is Ushna Batul there?
Yes, sir, I'm here.
All right. So what do we mean by definition of the problem?
For me, if I tell you for the definition of problem, I would say we have to find the particular answers for the problem to just get to know what we have to do for the customers and everybody.
So not answers, Ushna, we need to identify the elements of the problem, not the answers. At this stage, we are just trying to understand the problem. We've identified a problem, right? The first stage was identification of the problem, of understanding a customer, of knowing a customer who has a problem or a person who has a problem. The definition stage is looking at every single element of that problem, right? We've just talked about the boutique, right? It's on the first floor. Is it visible? How many stairs there are to climb it? Is parking simply available? Is parking a problem? Is that what causes friction? And instead of going to Zamzama, I say I'll go elsewhere. So we look at the problem in all its elements and define every single element. Without that, we cannot understand the problem. And if we don't understand it, we cannot get to the right solution for it. Right? So please understand the problem in every single element that you can think of. Keep breaking it down. Keep breaking it down into little and littler pieces. And each piece will give you a greater understanding. And that greater understanding will qualify you, prepare you to define the better solution for it. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. What's the next stage after defining? And what do we do at this stage? Quantity, not quality, right? We look at every little element, not just the big elements, not just saying, okay, it's on the first floor, so that's the problem. That is not the only problem. There are lots more. So each one of them has to be solved. Who's going to take on ideation? Again, I'm going to pick random. Sayyida Masoom. Zubaida Ismail. I'm just picking out random names. Aisha Alam. It's like a roll call. Somebody has to respond.
Hello.
G. Yes,
So
Aisha.
from what I understood from ideation was that while after defining the problem, you need to collect on ideas, and every single idea you can, even if it is the smallest idea you have. But after defining a problem and breaking it down into the smallest pieces and gathering up ideas for all of them would is a better option than just looking for quality ideas.
Yeah. Yeah, because you will arrive at the quality idea, at the perfect solution, right? After you looked at all the possible solutions that are there, right? So it's
Hmm.
important at this stage to look at every possible idea, every possible solution, because an idea is actually a solution to a problem. That's what it really is, right? What is Einstein doing? He did not have apparatus that could actually measure all the things that he was thinking of in his mind, right? So he was doing thought experiments. And what was the problem that he was trying to solve? Newton had defined a force called gravity. Einstein was trying to understand it in a different manner, right? So he was trying to relate it. He's saying, where is this force coming from? What is this force all about? That is the problem that was bothering his mind. And he started to think of it in terms of relative terms. He used to take a train journey every morning. He used to work in the patent office. Einstein tried to become a teacher, but every time he applied, they rejected him. So he never became a teacher. He ended up in the Bern patent office in Switzerland. And he had to take a train to work every day. So while he used to take the train or while he was standing on the platform, he was thinking. He was trying to understand, if I'm on the platform and a train passes by, what do I see? And the person in the train who's passing by, what does he or she see? So relativity came out of that simple thought experiment and then led him to the fabric of space time, right? So he started to think about it. He started to think about space. He started to think about time. He started to think about an expanding universe. And gravity, in his mind and in his experiments, happened to be this depression in the fabric of space time. So he actually imagined space time as a woven fabric, and gravity was the result of a mass placed on that fabric. It created a depression. And because of that depression, it created an attractive force. And that is gravity. Right? So just when you think about it, here was somebody who was plagued with a problem, who started to observe something. And from that observation, he started to think and saying, what is this that we can't understand? Why is it that we can't understand what this force is or how this force is created? And from that, by understanding that problem, he started to run it through his mind. He looked at every little element and realized that there is a correlation between time and space, because he was also studying light. He was studying how light travels. Today, we use solar energy. The whole concept of photovoltaic cells came out of Einstein's experiments. He discovered that light travels in both waves and packets, so photons and waves. It has both characteristics. And out of that came this whole thing, which is now a massive industry called solar energy. Right? Energy is not created from heat, it's being created from light. When you think about, when you look at the problem and you start to break it down into elements, and then you start to look at what kind of solutions those elements need, you will then arrive at possibly the perfect solution for that one individual or that one customer that then defines 1,000, 100,000, a million customers. Who's going to talk about prototyping? Any volunteers? None. So, Saida Adia, is that Fatima, I think? Yeah. So are you going to take that on?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes. So prototyping is basically when you have some sort of an idea about how you solve a problem. So you come up with some sort of a model which is, related to that actually solves the problem. It does not have to be the perfect model. I mean, you can gradually develop it, but it has to be something that solves that problem initially. And that's prototyping.
Brilliant. That's a very good definition and a very accurate definition. So if you look at, again, things that we use, so Facebook, so one of the most famous kind of pronouncements that Mark Zuckerberg made right at the beginning, because when he started to change things and, Facebook started to redesign and add elements and all that. So there was some criticism when his answer was, done is better than perfect. So first get it done. First get it done and get it out there. Let people starting to use it. And then you can start to improve it. Right? We go back to that same dish of biryani. First get it made. Make it. Make your first plate of biryani or your first deshka or deshki of biryani. Then get people to test it. Right? And then you can start to perfect it. Right? So we've talked about prototyping. So what is the purpose of testing? I mean, I think self-explanatory that, once you prototype something, once you've created an MVP is a minimum viable product, right? So that is an important stage of your customer journey, of your, whole design thinking, that you have a minimum viable product. So people can use it, they can test it, they can show you, or they can tell you, you carry out usability trials with those customers. And mostly these are friendly customers. So they're not going to go and dish you on social media and say, this is just too poor or something. So you test it. And from that data that you get, you feed it back. In fact, in design thinking, we don't say feed it back. You say you feed it forward, because you're going to go to the next stage, or you're going to redo something, or you're going to tweak something. So instead of feedback, you're feeding it forward. Even if it's going back to the first stage, it's to go forward. So design thinking uses that you feed forward instead of feeding back, because what is happening is you're improving it. You're making the customer journey better. You're making their experience better. Any questions you have at this stage? I'm sure there must be one question. Can't be that there's not a single question.
Sir, I have a question.
Sure.
So my
So
question is, sorry?
Tell us who you are. I can just see a you on my
I'm Ushna
screen.
Batul. I'm Ushna Batul.
Okay, Ushna. All right.
So
Yes,
sir, my
please.
question is that design and thinking is like applied in all the developing and creation of applications, and also the advertisement. So there are a lot of advertise in which I don't see a sense, like they does not make any sense. So I was thinking what kind of process they go through after making such kind of advertisement, like the gala advertisement. So I was just thinking on that.
Okay, you're absolutely right, and you've kind of put your finger on it straight away. If you don't understand your customer, how the hell are you going to design anything with them, even if it's an advertisement, the gala advertisement, right? The word was gala, right? So you wanted to give the impression of a festival, of something which is very festival, very festive, very happy moment. But you should have understood that your customers are going to react to something that they normally would not be acceptable to them. So you need to understand your customer. You need to understand how that communication would go down with them, how that imagery would go down with them. I mean, I saw a lot of the conversations about gala. I have my background in advertising was primarily in strategic communication, in understanding the customer and saying, what does the customer really think? It starts with that. You're designing something, you're trying to sell that biscuit to a person, to a person. And that person may be similar to another million, to a million people with the same kind of thought processes or similar kind of thought processes. Maybe not 100% similar, but enough similarities for them to become a segment and a group. So you have to understand who that person is before you even design any communication for them, any advertisement for them. So design thinking is not just what you saw on the screen. That is the result of how you were thinking. You have to first start with that first building block, which is the person that you're targeting. You have to understand their mindset. So why does humor work in advertising? Humor works in advertising because when I'm feeling better, when I'm in a happier mood, I'm more receptive to what you're trying to tell me. My filters in my mind, my natural filters go down because I'm in a different state of mind. I'm in a happy state of mind. I'm less skeptical. I will accept more of what you tell me. So you need to understand the customer. The gala advertisement is a good example that you've just given, right, of how people think. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So how many business students here? If you're in the, if you just raise your hands, there is a button which says raise hand where the participants are. If you just raise your hands, business students. Yeah, Hadia. So Hadia, you tell us, what do you understand of entrepreneurship? Hadia, if you can unmute your mic and tell us, what does entrepreneurship mean to you? That one word. It's basically new ideas. All right, you're saying, can't read all of it.
Sir,
Yes.
question that design thinking also applies like when you are making any product, you also have to feel the emotions of your customer. Like you can say dalda, and their tagline is like jaha mamta waha dalda. Like it's about the emotions of customer, right?
Absolutely. You cannot understand the customer unless you understand their emotional makeup, right? So we talked about demographics and psychographics. Psychographics about understanding the emotional side. We are emotional animals, right? The elephant in the brain is what we talk about when we are doing workshops in design thinking, that there is the elephant in the brain. That elephant is actually emotions. And it is the elephant that leads us. The reasonable side of our brain is what we call the reptilian side of our brain, right? So that is where we reason. But emotions always overcome reason, always, because the elephant has its own mind, right? That is your emotional side. And a perfect example of dalda and jahan mamta hai wahan dalda hai. Because what is motherhood all about? What is mamta? It is about caring. It is about protection. It is about feeling for my family. So I'm going to serve them, or I'm going to cook in the best medium possible that gives them that gives them that protection, that gives them that flavor and taste. They love my food. They are safe eating what I cook for them because I use the best cooking medium. So there is that emotional side. And most of us, in fact, all of us, make decisions driven by emotions. We justify them by reason, but we make the decision with our emotions. Even when we are buying a car, the color of the car is an emotional decision more so than a reasonable decision. We don't reason it, we emote. So the emotion side of it is a very important side, right? And we cannot understand the customer unless we understand their emotional makeup. Emotional makeup may be defined by their environment, by what they do, what kind of if they're let's say knowledge workers, they are freelancers who are trying to who are servicing customers abroad. So they're more likely to have more empathy, they're more likely to have more exposure to different cultures. And that exposure to different cultures, because they're dealing with different kinds of people. One day they might be servicing a client in Australia. The next day they've taken on an assignment with somebody in the US. A third day they're doing something for somebody sitting in Norway, right? So all these experiences will create a whole basket of emotions which make up that person. So understanding at the emotional level is the critical element. So that is when we are doing friendly user trials. We see how people use a particular product, right? So there are two elements there. One is the way, the in the hands, when you give somebody an application and they have it on their phone and they're flicking through it with their thumb, they stop, they click on something. So that's one part of it. How they relate to the colors. Do they like dark mode? Do they like light mode? Do they like buttons in a certain color? There is a whole theory of color. So what does red mean? What does yellow mean? What does blue mean? What does green mean? So all these are elements when you're defining and you're making any communication. So if you look at commercials, you will see elements there. Good agencies who are designing good communication, they take care of all these issues. They look at every single element, right? And then they define that communication so it can be effective. Otherwise, natural instinct, filters drop, your communication will not get through. Your message will not get through. So we had I think there was in the chat. Why can't I see it? Can somebody read out the question that was
Yeah, I'm reading it.
Okay.
It's a question from Hadia Fareed, and she's saying it's basically new ideas in someone who has risk-taking ability. She's actually explaining about what the term entrepreneurship is.
Entrepreneurship. Okay. So Hadia, the term entrepreneurship is actually a person who solves a problem. Entrepreneurs are people who solve problems. That is the key to entrepreneurship, a problem solver. Think about it. Think about everybody that you know who's an entrepreneur. Not necessarily a business person, not necessarily a businessman. Even businessmen start out as entrepreneurs. They start out with solving a problem. Student biryani, right? What could be simpler than that? When did it start out and how did it start out? Where did it start out? Outside St. Joseph and St. Patrick's, right? In the southern. I mean, I've had student biryani in 1975 when it was one guy with a big dig and he would scoop up with a plate and he'd give you a plate of student biryani. So there was a need of a meal that was affordable, was flavorful, and that is the problem that that person who started that business solved. Today, it is franchised across at least 20-25 cities. There are franchises in Lahore, in Faisalabad, in Multan. Student biryani is franchised. Now you can just pick up the phone and you can order student biryani. You can click on the Food Panda button and student biryani can be delivered to you. Right? So it's about solving a problem. Entrepreneurs are problem solvers. They may be solving a problem which has social impact, or they may be solving a problem which offers a simpler, better solution. And out of that, a business grows. Out of that, a business comes up. Kalanick was a problem solver. He saw the problem that people need transportation, urban transportation. The other side of it is People buy cars, and for about 20 hours of the day, the car is just standing there. It's not doing anything. It's dead investment. So he looked at both elements of the problem and said, are there going to be enough cars available? The answer is yes. So entrepreneurs are problem solvers. That is where they start from. And if they define the right problem, if they first find the right problem, define it, and then design the perfect solution, they're going to have a big business. Do we have any more questions? All right, I would advise you all, the two elements that we talked about, right, were the customer persona and the customer journey. So design thinking is something that you thread through all the way, from understanding the customer to defining that journey for them, which leads them to become promoters of your product or service. They reach that stage where they love your product or service so much that they become your strongest promoters, which is what we call virality. Your problem or your solution or your product and your service goes viral. Everybody wants to talk about it. Google, most of you just use Google, but when it started out, Google never advertised. Never. It grew through virality. It grew because people discovered it, shared it with others, and it kept growing from there. They didn't need to advertise it. It was such a good solution to a very big problem. Number of pages, number of web pages were growing on the internet, millions and then billions of pages, then hundreds of billions of pages. It was never going to be easy to find anything. And Google came up with the perfect solution. And they started that search engine, which became the ultimate tool for you to navigate the World Wide Web. Right? So you need to look at it from that perspective. Now, we simply say Google it. It's become a term, it's become a verb. Right? I've been saying, why don't you Google it today and find and see what customer persona is, look at the templates, look at what the customer journey map is, so you can understand, how the customer journey can be defined, and that brings all of the elements of design thinking together. I think we're just
Sir, I
about,
have a question.
yeah, please.
My name is Sarah, and I have a question. The question is, if we are in a market that is highly saturated and there are
Mhm.
multiple of products for that problem, they are
Yeah,
solving the they're giving the solution, they're solving the problem, but you
yeah.
want to come up with a product that is solving the same problem, but it's your own product and you have to bring a twist to it. So how do you find a product as such in a market that is very saturated nowadays?
Okay. So what you just defined is what most people are facing, right? Most products and services face this. There is nothing really, really new. There is no new thing. It's always something that's already been there, but there's a different way of doing it. So you also, in that question, is your answer that you have to have some point of differentiation. You have to have some uniqueness to the solution that you're offering, the product that you're offering. It may be a very simple thing, but it will give you an advantage. So in entrepreneurship and design thinking, we also look at what is that point of differentiation? What is it that defines your solution as the better solution? There has to be that. If it doesn't offer that, then you're not going to have success with it. Customers are not necessarily going to adopt it. At times, geography is an example, right? A shop, or let's say a service. Let's look at a salon, right? Let's look at a hair salon. Uh, it comes up in closer geography to me. It is offering the same thing that another salon does, but it's closer to where I am. Geography may define it, right? So that's one difference. You have to always find that unique differentiation, that unique value proposition. We're not talking design, we're not talking business model today. Otherwise, if we were talking business model, we will be doing the business model canvas. And we'd be talking about all these things and saying, what is the value proposition that you're offering? There has to be some unique value that you offer through your product or your service. If you can't define that value, you cannot and you don't have a product that will be of any use to anybody. Because out of that value proposition, when you connect that value proposition to your target segment, you then have a viable product or a viable service. You cannot go out into a market, and most markets are saturated, and you cannot go there with the same thing. It's got to be something different. Even a little bit of difference, 2.5, 2 or 5% difference can make a difference. You need to look at that. Then there are deeper things like what you call red oceans and blue oceans. So at times, you just by placing it in a different place, by putting your product in a different place, you can create what is called a blue ocean for it, which means there isn't much competition around it. If I go and open, let's say, uh, a Coca-Cola stand in the desert, I may not get enough customers, but the one customer that does come to me will have no other option, right? So, I mean, this is an extreme example of geography, but you look at it. Why do you open a shop in a shopping mall like Dolman? Because traffic is coming to it, right? There's a lot of traffic coming to the mall, and I'm sitting there. Now, I'm in competition with every other shop there because that same customer would go and spend the same money in the shop next door to me. But I have to have some point of differentiation. So Aga Noor is priced lower than the others. That is the point of differentiation that Aga Noor has. It offers you similar kind of product, similar kind of fabric, similar kind of design, let's say, thinking, similar kind of pricing is their main difference, right? So they're offering a unique proposition in that way, that nobody is offering you Pret at that price. Everybody is offering you Pret. You can go to any of the shops and you can pick up something off the rack, but it will not have that price element or that advantage in price. So this is another small example, right? So small little things can make the difference. I just earlier we talked about coffee in Japan. Now, if you have a coffee shop and you start to do that here, you're maybe right next to another coffee shop, but he's offering a sachet of sugar, and you're giving them a little pot with liquid sugar in it. That's a point of differentiation. My experience will bring me back to have your coffee rather than go elsewhere.
Yes, sir, I get it. Thank you.
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah.
I have another question if you can answer.
Piyush. Sure.
So my question is, for suppose I have made a product and it's not very successful. So how would I identify the problem?
Your customer is going to tell you the problem. The customer is going to tell you why they don't like your product, right? You will learn very, very quickly from the customer's acceptance or non-acceptance. So one of the main elements why businesses fail, right, is not money. It's not because you didn't have enough money. That is one element, but it is way down the ladder. The primary element why businesses fail is what we call product market fit. That the product or service that you designed, you defined, you took to market did not fit the needs of a customer. There was no fit. So when there is no fit, it is not going to succeed. So again, you go back to customer centricity, understanding your customer, knowing your customer as deeply as you possibly can. Then your product will be designed to fit that need. So product market fit is the critical question. I don't know how many of you have heard of Y Combinator, but Google that today. It is the world's largest accelerator, right? They've got billion-dollar companies that came out of Y Combinator. And everybody at Y Combinator will talk about product market fit. If you go to YouTube, you can find Michael Siebel, right? Google Michael Siebel on YouTube or search Michael Siebel on YouTube, and you will find out what product market fit means. There are many others who talk about product market fit. Business models. are really what sell, not necessarily technology. Technology doesn't sell by its own. It's the business model that sells. A coffee machine, Nespresso, they first thought they would sell coffee machines, but they had to rethink. And it is when they started to make those flavored coffee pods that it actually took off. Because the fit in the market was for flavored coffee that people wanted to have in their own homes or in their own offices. So you have to find product market fit, that perfect relationship between your product and service and the customer. If that relationship does not exist, no matter how much money you put in, that business will fail.
Thank you so much, sir. I get it.
Okay. So we are at 3 p.m. Actually, had not checked. I thought it was 1:30. My mistake. So that teaches me a lesson that I need to be more, vigilant in terms of my calendar. Thank you all so much. I hope you all found this useful. Any of you wants to reach out, I am just going to put my email here so you can reach out and you can ask any questions you want.
Thank you so much for conducting an amazing session. I hope the audience had a great chance to learn new things. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending the session. I have shared the feedback form with you all. If you want, you can share your feedback on the form. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum, Faisal. Thank you so much for doing this for us and for having an interesting session. I just joined towards the end, but I enjoyed the questions that the young women were asking you and your responses.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's talk a little about She Loves Tech. So they should also know a little about She Loves Tech. And why do we say She Loves Tech? And what is it all about? So, I mean, the reason why I believe that She Loves Tech is doing much more than a lot of other initiatives out there because it focuses on women. It recognizes them. It recognizes that they have the ability to use technology to fashion solutions to problems that are there. So if we look at Pakistan and we look at the problems that Pakistan has, education, health, food security, energy, climate change, mobility, right? All these problems are solvable. And there is no barrier to what a woman can do when she puts her mind to it. So this is not the domain of only male entrepreneurs, right? And I've seen, and some of you've seen, that the female entrepreneurs that emerge out of these initiatives, out of these competitions, like She Loves Tech or your initiative of Tech Karo, right? We all need to skill ourselves. I'm an what should I call it? Incorrigible advocate now of skill development because I believe that degrees are for a purpose. If you haven't acquired the skills that that degree actually represents, right, it is not going to do you any good. Even yesterday, I had a conversation with a young person who was struggling whether he should, take his family business forward or he should go out and get a master's degree. And we finally arrived that he needs to possibly give some time to the family business, see what he can do to make a difference there, use technology to scale it, grow it, take it to more customers, and then down the line, if he wants to deepen his own skill set, he can go to college, he can go to university, he can take courses, he can do any of those things. I mean, I talk about this young girl in Lahore called Zaina, who I met a year and a half ago. She was 14 when she did her A levels, and she did not go to college or university after that. She did continue to take courses online, but what actually interested her was the kitchen. She makes the most delicious ice cream. And every week I meet Zaina and I ask her, and I say, how's your business doing? And she tells me of how many customers she's acquired that week. Sitting in Lahore, she's actually delivering ice cream to customers in Karachi now. She packs it in dry ice and she sends it by courier. Right? So here's a young girl, right, who followed her heart, who followed her passion, right? And she has developed a product line that if you once try it, you keep going back to it again and again.
Yes. Terrific. And we would also encourage all of you over here. We just had our She Loves Tech finals and it's been posted on our Facebook page. So if you would like to, listen to some of the pitches, you learn a lot. The judges asking questions, that also makes you think about your product. Communities will become strong and Pakistan